Have you ever met someone and the moment you see them, you feel more peaceful and at ease? Well, that is exactly how I felt the moment I met my guest today, David Nichtern. David is not only a calm presence, but also a senior Buddhist teacher in the lineage of Chogyam Rinpoche. He has been practicing and teaching meditation for over 45 years. He is the founder and CEO of Dharma Moon, a mindfulness-based education platform and global community. David is also Grammy-nominated and Emmy Award-winning composer, producer, and guitarist who has worked with artists such as Stevie Wonder, Garcia, Krishna, Maria Muldaur, and Paul Simon, just to name a few. He has been featured in the New York Times, Fox News, Netflix's The Midnight Gospel, and the Huffington Post. David is also the author of Awakening from the Daydream and Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck. If this was not enough, David is incredibly funny, kind, and memorable. So grab yourself a cup of tea or your meditation pillow and get ready to learn from one of the best teachers here on Cracking Open. Hello, good morning, David. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. What a gift.
Good morning, Molly.
What a gift.
Thank you for having me on your first podcast. I'm excited.
First podcast ever. I feel so lucky that I get to be with a renowned Buddhist teacher. His presence alone is making me feel much calmer having this be my first podcast. But I want to welcome my Cracking Open community to the amazing David Nichtern, who is known for so much different success. He was nominated for Emmys and Grammys, and he's worked with musicians like Garcia and Stevie Wonder, Krishna, Maria Muldaur, and Paul Simon, just to name a few. And if that wasn't enough success for this amazing man, he's also known as a highly regarded meditation teacher and the founder of Dharma Moon. And he's had successful businesses, has been writing for the New York Times and Huffington Post. So there's a lot for us to go today, a lot for us to share today. So I'm so excited to crack open with you, David. So thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me. And, I've spent a lot of time with comedians in my life. So I've cracked up, but I don't know if I've cracked open with anybody before. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, get ready. One of my favorite sayings of my husband is to say that Molly can learn and get more out of someone in an elevator that I've known for 20 years.
Wow.
So let's just see where we go, huh?
Well, but what can she learn from somebody who she's been with for 20 years then? That must be interesting.
We keep cracking and cracking. Cracking is the beautiful thing that I love about life. So,
great.
Well, I've thought a lot about you, and I've been, sitting with you and reading about you this past few weeks. And, what I would love to hear just to beginning is around you is, how did this all evolve?
So when you say this all, you mean what I think of as kind of maybe not totally unique about me, but a characteristic of me is a blending of influences of different things, which is, I think that might be what you're referring to as, which culminated in me writing a book called Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck, which is really me trying to sum up my own journey for the benefit of others who might be on a similar journey, which is, I think, what we do, right? You look at your own experience and you say, well, what's a value that might be of value to other people? So for me, it was a blending of different aspects of life that each were very singularly important to me. So I've had a very full-on career in music. I've studied Buddhism really deeply and been studying and teaching it for actually 50 years. I know that sounds like insane to say that.
No, I did the math this morning. I did the math. I was like, it started in the 70s. It's 50 years.
I started in 1970, and there is also a feeling at this time in my life of wanting to kind of sum it up a little bit, and sort of see what what it all looked like together on one page. So that's what that book is, sort of semi-autobiographical, but it's also a journey that is laid out for the benefit of other similar people out there, which I think there's a lot of us out there who are blending creative expression with some kind of spiritual practice with livelihood. It's not addressed all that often. When I studied Buddhism, nobody was really talking about creativity and livelihood. And when I was in the music world, nobody was really talking about meditating. Now it's more common that people are looking for the integration. So that's really what I'm about.
Well, and that's there's so much I adore about you, and just even reading about you and watching videos and things this week preparing for this podcast. But one of my favorite things about you, because even as a therapist, I see this, there's not one way for healing.
Mm.
There's many paths. And I think one of the greatest aspects of a teacher is to be able to open up themselves and the students in learning about the different paths. And you kind of have presented a very unique path that I haven't seen or heard a lot about in Buddhist teachers, which I really appreciate. And that is around, your meditation practice, having some essence of creativity and making a buck.
Yeah.
Having your livelihood. I often say, how am I going to pay for my kids' sports and organic food? We got to make a buck somewhere, right? So I really, really appreciate that. So Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to this place? Have you always been there, or was this the way you were raised with creativity, spirituality?
It's such a great question. As you know, we talk about karma in the Buddhist world. That word is kind of used and abused in the popular vernacular, but it really means, how did events organize themselves? How did we come to be in the situation that we're in? You wake up on a beautiful morning out there in the West Coast, there where you are, and the sun is shining and flowers are blooming, and you feel miserably depressed. You go, well, how did that happen? How did we get there? So the karma is a big deal in the Buddhist world. I wrote a whole book on it called Awakening from the Daydream, and that's really, how did we get here is a really interesting question, because there's two answers to it. One is no idea. We really don't know. It's like we wake up in the middle of a dream. If you ask people, like, it's Thursday at 3 p.m., do you remember how you got here? They might not even remember how they got into that room.
Right.
It's like, so there's this apparitional quality to reality, that it's just a kind of illusory quality that just appears, And then there's this really strong personal history that we have, which is personal, group, family, society, human, global, cosmic level of history. And so we're all, I think, part of being human is we're sort of scratching at ourselves in a way to figure out how we got here and what are we supposed to do.
You saying that, David, reminds me of two things that I would love to touch on. The first one is a quote I read that you wrote, or someone wrote about you. I think it's you wrote it, that I loved. And it's the principle of joining heaven and earth, a classical paradigm in Asian thought. Heaven is the pure realm of the mind or consciousness in Buddhist terms, and earth is the realm of relative reality, which is subject to impermanence. If people have too much heaven, they have vision, but they don't know what to do with it. If they're too mirrored in the earth, they have no vision, no direction, no kind of ultimate sense of what they're doing. And why I love this quote so much is because what you're touching on is so much what I've learned as a therapist, is that we need these dual polarities. We need heaven and we need earth to ground us, earth to get our to-do list done. And yet this heaven, this integration of heaven to connect us to something bigger than ourselves, or consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, God, whatever your verbiage is. So when you say that, this sense of kind of scratching this itch, of like waking up, and it's like, how do you teach? How do you help people kind of connect to both their heaven and earth?
Well, it's of course, there's so many modalities out there now, and maybe more than ever, it's there's all the spiritual traditions of the world are present in the United States right now. You could take a workshop tomorrow on anything ranging from Sufism to shamanism to esoteric Christianity to Buddhism. So, and we have added our own sort of Western culture, which is sort of more scientific and analytic and, psychiatric therapy. So, what do we utilize? So I utilize the Buddha's method because it jibed with my way of thinking. Mm-hmm. That's what you do. You go like, well, this resonated for me. Mm-hmm. So here's what the Buddha started with. Where does it hurt? Like a doctor, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, where does it hurt? They don't say, tell me how great you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't go to your doctor and say, boy, I have so much energy and I feel vibrant. And then they go, yes. And you go, yeah, but my knee is killing me.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddha started like that. It's called the first noble truth. It's where,
Mm-hmm.
what is the suffering
Mm-hmm.
going on? And then what is the source of that suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And then liberating it.
Mm-hmm.
And liberating it through a method or a sort of progression, which is called the Eightfold Path, so that you have a way of working with your life situation. And it's just the most ordinary stuff. It's work. It is mindfulness of speech. It is how to hold your mind, in a present, mindful way. Just working directly along with the energy of life is the whole path. But where does it hurt? I'm sure as a therapist, don't you ask people that? You must, right?
I ask people all the time, or I say, "Where's your heart right now?" Or where where are you in pain, or where are you in
Mm,
pleasure? I
mm,
totally agree with that. And so you saying that makes me think about you, David, and your life. And you're in
Oh
New York
God.
City, and it's the 70s,
Well, I
and you
want to go
said
back
Buddhism
further.
resonated.
Let me go back further because you
Yeah,
said, where does it hurt?
yeah. Where does it hurt? Like
I'm
what?
I'm
Yeah.
from a Jewish family in New York.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole thing, right? And when you said, where does it hurt?
Mm,
My first thought was because it's also there's a humor attached to it and there's a sort of long history of suffering, right?
mm.
Um, so when you said where's it hurt, I thought, Oi Gewalt, how much time do you have?
I was like, can we do four another podcasts on that? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I just told you from the inside of my own life, um, there's a lot of areas in which things didn't seem to be working out exactly right, you know, and not what you hoped for, not what you expected. So, and then I also look back and I go, oh, there's just this sweet quality to the whole thing, which I experience a lot these days, the tenderness, the sweetness, the poignancy of, I get pictures of my granddaughter on
Mm.
Instagram and, you'd think, well, gee, how hard is it to make this person happy? Just send him a picture of his granddaughter on
Oh,
Instagram.
oh.
So, the life in the human world has these both qualities. But for me, the suffering part, I would say, was, there's, and not to be doctrinal about it, but there's a Buddhist thing where the pain comes from is not getting what you want and getting what you don't want are the two major sources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of getting what I didn't want, I would say one of my main anchors in terms of really understanding suffering is within the family. Uh, uh, I come from an era in which Ozzie and Harriet was on television. My three sons, people
Right.
had nuclear families. They were living in the suburbs. Everybody, the dad was going off to work. The mom was a happy housewife. The kids were going to school. There was little jokes going on. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of grew up in that era, which
Mm-hmm.
is the 50s. I was born in 1948, so the 50s. And my dad was a doctor. Um, my mom at that time was not working. She was helping him out and helping to raise the family. And then at a certain point, the energy in my family shifted, and then a lot of challenges came up that were very, very pressing on a teenage boy who was having his own journey going on, which it's hard enough to be a teenager in New York in the
Right.
first place. But my family kind of crumbled in
Mm.
my teen years, and then and with looking at how much pain my parents were in was you know was a challenging thing for somebody who's coming into their own you know individual sovereignty. Uh, so I had a lot. I had to deal with a lot of extremely painful interpersonal dynamics in my own family. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
that was something that really cranked up the sensitivity level.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question about that?
Sure.
I just think
Sure.
what you're speaking right now, people feel, and I think what happens, David, is people look at you or look
Mm,
at your Wikipedia page
mm,
and think he's got it. He's got this renowned Buddhist teacher. He's calm. He's successful. He's played with all these famous musicians. and we get into the comparing mind. But I think what you're sharing with us now is so helpful for people,
Yeah.
because it was that what you said was crumbling. I heard cracking, right? Because I go to this
Yeah. Yeah.
cracking open
Sure.
piece.
Yeah.
Your family was kind of cracking open,
It
and you're
was.
this adolescent going through the individuation process,
Not to mention puberty,
puberty,
for God's sake.
right? In an era of,
Yeah.
My three sons and Leave It to
Yeah. That's right.
Beaver.
Right. That's
And
right.
how did you, what did that look like? I mean, did it crumble more for you? Did you go more towards crumbling? Did you go more towards, disassociation or avoidance? Like, where did you go in those
Well,
moments in Manhattan in your apartment,
it's so funny because, we can scan through space and time, right? And you can, like, I'm just going right back there, and you can bring increasing vividness to memory. So I'm back there now, and as soon as you said that, I'm playing the guitar.
Yes.
I think my creativity was a tremendous resource. And my friends at the time were bluegrass musicians in New York, and we had this special kind of music which is bluegrass in New York.
Ah.
Hello, that's from Kentucky. So
I was
we
thinking the same
yeah,
state. I
yeah,
said, that's Kentucky. That's not New York
yeah.
City, but.
But for us, it was a special little treasure that we found. And I was in bands throughout high school and college, and playing music was my, um, you know, I'm not going to say I was dissociating into the music, but I was um, maybe, and I don't really even think escaping, but it was an area of enjoyment, of discovery, of kind of, and it's still to this day when I work with people, and if they're musicians, I have a real sweet spot for them. Any
Ah.
musician, even whether they're professional, amateur, I don't care. If somebody's playing with music and enjoying that aspect, it's been such a valuable and important part of my life.
You make me think about when I had babies and they would be tantruming. If I just took out the ch 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 or a drum,
Ah,
boom 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 boom, or we had a little ukulele, they stop. It calms the
wow.
system, right? So I
Uh,
see this teenager David, and it's like the house is crumbling, and mom and dad are going through their thing or whatever, and you go into the self. It's almost kind of like, I know Buddhists don't believe in the self, right? The
well,
separation of self, but maybe you were going into a place of the soul, even, or to a place of healing versus escapism. I heard healing. Music
yeah,
was
and I
your
was going into
healing.
my own personal expression. So this whole thing about the self in Buddhists is largely misunderstood.
Oh.
There is obviously, anybody who has two eyes and two ears would say there's an individual track going on. Whether that tracks to a permanent entity called a soul or a self or Atman in the original tradition is a separate issue, worth exploring, But of course, there's an individual journey going on, and we call it relative truth, is what we call it. That's all. It's just the relative situation. And in my relative journey, I was tasting, the sorrow of missed communications, of negative emotions piling up with people, and kind of at a vulnerable age being really getting a full face full of that, not from a book or a movie, but in my own house.
Mm-hmm.
I saw, wow, there's some really intense dark possibilities with people trying to love each other.
Mm.
Two people who got together because they loved each other are now like the mortal enemies. My parents became mortal enemies,
Mm.
and so and it's not because it's because they loved each other. That to me is the irony of interpersonal dynamics. Is people are trying to connect, they're trying to be happy, and like my friend Krishna Das says sometimes, it's just they have bad aim. The gun is loaded full of ammunition, but they don't know where to shoot.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is
Yeah,
so true. So you're
yeah,
sitting, so you're for your story, you're sitting in this apartment. Your parents are fighting. It's volatile. They love each other, but you can tell, I don't mean to assume, but I'm guessing the marriage dissolved. Maybe they got divorced.
yeah. They
And
got divorced.
you went on your path, right? You went on to
Yeah,
Columbia for college, studied
right.
music.
No, I didn't study music actually
Oh, you
then.
didn't? Oh, no.
Music was always my own thing. I
Okay.
never thought, oh, I'll be a professional musician, because
Oh.
my father was a doctor.
Mm.
There's a joke in the Jewish world in New York. The Jewish mother says, the doctor was 2 when I was pregnant with the lawyer. There was expectation that you would, also because we came from families that had, were immigrants and stuff. The fact that my father had gotten to be, everybody, thought this was a great accomplishment, achievement. So I went into Columbia College thinking I was going to be a doctor. I was a pre-medical student. And then I had a couple of things to knock me off that track. One was we were in advanced biology class, and you had to dissect a frog.
Oh, yeah.
And you had to kill the frog. I thought, I don't know if I want to kill a frog with my bare hands. You had to snap its neck against the table so you could have its organs fresh as you dissected it and learned about it.
Wow.
And that was a very vivid moment for me. And the other was organic chemistry. I just couldn't figure it out. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I just didn't know which end of it was up. So then I had an English minor, that was my minor, literature. And then I dropped out of my junior year of the medical thing. So that was a big turning point of like, gosh, I'm not going to be a doctor. And then I was an English major. And then when I graduated from college, I thought, oops, what am I going to do for money? And I just had always been a musician, and I just started getting jobs playing music. So it was kind of an accident.
Well, you say it's kind of an accident, but I think, and we've mentioned a lot of your father's success of being a doctor, but you also had this mother that was
Well,
amazing and a creative.
and my mother's side of the family. So if you look at, some people would say that our destiny or direction in life is to unify, integrate, harmonize the energy of our 2 parents, which is, you go right back to Freud, wherever you want to go with that. But obviously the father represents one lineage and the mother another. So my father was a healer. He was a doctor. He was always interested in, and he was also always interested in working with children. He was a pediatrician and a child psychiatrist. And my mom was, and again, this was a sign of the times. My mother was a quote unquote housewife, very ill-equipped for that role. Actually, we had a housekeeper. My mom was always a very intelligent woman. She should have been, like these days, she would have been a career person like that from day one. So this was a transition. So when we grew up a little bit, she started looking around to fulfill herself, and she went over to the Phoenix Theater in Manhattan and just worked as an assistant there. And then she got hooked on the theater, and then she propelled herself through. And this is not at the beginning. This is in her 40s.
Wow.
And she became first, a casting director, and then she produced some plays, and then she produced some major hits on Broadway. And and in fact, my first job as a professional musician was working in the band of a musical that she produced on Broadway called Jimmy Shine, and it was starring Dustin Hoffman. And this is me right out of college. And my uncle Irv, who was another major influence, great musician, was the music director and piano player. So that was the other side. I have those 2 sides. I've thought about that a lot. The healing side and the music side. We were very well represented in the way I was brought up.
And I love the story of your mother. But one of the other stories you've told me that I think is so important, especially for all the women that are listening to this podcast, is where your mother propelled to, and the article in the New York Times. If you would share a little bit of that story, I think it would resonate with a lot of the women who listen to this
funny?
podcast.
Yeah, the women are so far past this right now. And, I'm thinking of writing a book called In One Era and Out the Other.
Oh, I love that title.
But it's been used already, unfortunately.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's like being a songwriter. You go, oops, yeah, that one's been taken already. But I almost feel like I grew up in a different time domain than we're in now. And so several iterations later, but my mother in her time, this was not common for a woman to take on this kind of it was the very, very beginning of women's liberation, which is old news already to a certain extent. And so she shows up as this major Broadway hit theater producer, and they write an article about it in the New York Times, which was before the internet. The New York Times was a big deal. Maybe it's still a little bit of a big deal, but
yes.
But they talk about her winning a Tony Award. She actually won a Tony for producing on Broadway. And they have a picture of her with an apron on and a big pot. I remember the pot, and she's like stirring a pot. Like, this is what, oh, by the way, she also produces hit Broadway shows. Can you imagine if somebody did that now? It would be like, it wouldn't even be offensive. It would be inconceivable.
Exactly. And everyone would know it's not the truth. I mean, it's like they're, it's not the whole picture.
It's not the whole picture. And in her case, it was not even part of the picture because she really wasn't much of a cook. We had somebody who cooked most of the food. She was always a kind of business person. I get a lot of my business skills, not from my dad, but from my mom. And I end up working, this, but I work with a lot of women in my business world. I'm very comfortable working with women in business. But I think it's because my mom was such a good business. She was sharp as a tack.
Wow. So I love where we are now. It's like you've shared a little bit of us of like your childhood and kind of, what you went through, what drew you to music, what drew you to Buddhism, what drew you to business. All these different areas. And from all this, I mentioned in the beginning, you've had this success. You've worked with amazing artists, and they've luckily been able to work with you. You've had successful businesses, 2 published books, a deep, deep meditation practice. And here you are today. Can I say your age?
Yeah, I just said
73.
It.
You already said it. Okay. Yeah. 73. And what I want so much about this podcast to be is around what you're cracking open moments in your life. What have they taught you?
Yeah.
How have you grown? Like, it's almost kind of like if there were 3 or 4 or 5 things that you could share with people, like,
sure.
Look, sitting in this space of all this life, this beautiful life.
Yeah. That's sweet.
Today?
Thank you for asking. It's so nice to be asked something like that. And I think it bodes well for your podcast, that people get to share that. When we spoke previously to this, I thought, this is, and I'm going to resonate with what your husband, Adam, said, which is that you have a gift for being receptive to people's inner story, and that's, there's the outer story and there's the inner story.
It's the greatest teachings, it's the greatest teachings.
Well, we say that the outer story comes and goes.
It's the shell.
I don't, it's also nutritious. Like when you say shell, like a lobster, that's not the part you eat, but I think you eat the outer story too. It'd be more like a soft shell crab. That's
a good idea. Yeah. What could I say? That's a good one to think about. What could I say? That's a good outer. We eat the outer and the inner. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing. But coming back to your question about cracking open is, we have a way of talking about this in the tradition I come from, which is, it's interesting, in the Shambhala teachings, they talk about the cocoon, which is a kind of metaphor but a kind of softer, fuzzier metaphor for the shell that you're talking about. And what it's made of is habitual patterns. Mm-hmm. And what those are generated by primarily is fear. Mm-hmm. So I think if I said one thing to anybody, I'd say, don't be afraid. Or, there's a book my teacher wrote called Smile at Fear. How do you engage fear as a kind of transformational or not a limiting experience? Like you hit the wall of fear and you go, I can't go any further. And maybe explore fear would be the thing. So when I think about what I've been afraid of in my life, and of course, I work with a lot of students and I work with a lot of people one-to-one. What I think what most of us are afraid of is being embarrassed. Isn't that weird?
Interesting.
Under the, of course we're afraid of dying and getting beaten up, and we might have physical anxieties. We might be afraid of losing others, but it's so day to day, moment by moment, as I watch people's behavior, I go, oh, you're doing that because you're afraid to be embarrassed. You don't want to just show up as naked.
Well, and I think what you're saying is underneath embarrassment is really being seen for who they are.
Well
Truly
said.
being seen. And
Right.
that's scary.
Well, it's scary, but it's also so fabulous.
And
It's like,
liberating.
people love that. Everybody's
Mhm.
looking for that.
Always.
Right?
Always. That's all anyone wants. Like you could sit on this podcast and talk Buddhism the whole time, David, and there'd be people would learn a lot, but people want to know who you are in that cocoon.
Right. Well, but coming back to the notion of the cocoon, the first thing we do is make friends with it. That's an interesting thing. We don't get out the scissors or the when your image of the cracking open the nutcracker, we go like, let's soften into it a little bit first. Let's make friends with our fear, with who we are, and so there's some kind of gentle touch. Then it can, if you have too much aggression towards the cocoon, right, then it's hard to go further. Right. So a lot of people, for example, entering meditation, they just want to crack open. They want to get to the thing. They want to stabilize. So we have we're kind of a more kinder, gentler approach towards cracking open.
No, and I love that. And I actually, what my favorite part about cracking open is if you actually watch a chick coming out of a shell, it takes its time. It doesn't rush.
Yeah.
It does a little peck and then kind of comes back into the womb, and then pecks a little more and comes back into the womb. And that's kind of I hear what you're saying. So in your metaphor of the cocoon and being compassionate toward yourself and softening into your fear, is there anything you're even still afraid of?
Oh, sure.
Are there still fears you're facing today? And how do you soften into this? What are those fears? And how do you, like, just a daily fear, and how do you soften into those to kind of...
For example, I'm 73. Friends are dropping off. 2 years ago, I lost one of my lifetime best friends, and somebody I had intimacy with because we played music together in a way that was probably only a couple of other people in my life. We were reading each other's minds, and so that was a very special friend. And he, I actually fixed him up with his wife. So, there was a long arc there, and it became, I had dinner with him and his wife, and life goes on, and we have dinner, and we go like, okay, everything's normal. And then he just had this little growth behind his ear. And I said, well, oh, what's that going on? He said, well, long story short, it was a melanoma. It's what my mother died from. I know from melanoma what it is. And I remember the words, it's the most capricious and pernicious cancer there is. Those two words together. So I thought, uh-oh. And they went through the usual journey that people go through with cancer, and he tried to do his best to get medical treatment, whatever was available to him. And he also had become a Buddhist. He'd become a Zen Buddhist. So he also knew that he could die. Now, Buddhists are the people who every day think, I could die right now.
Right.
And people say that, but it's different if you go like, I mean, literally right now. People think, oh, well, in 20 years, I'm going to die, and I'm going to age, and I'm going to have my retirement first. You may not.
Right.
You may not. So the situation evolved very quickly with my friend John. And then we gathered together knowing that he was going to be dying as a conscious community, as friends and family who were, many of whom were Buddhists. How are we going to do this? How's he going to do this? And he did it beautifully and kind of with a lot of dignity. But it was so poignant. So I look at his body wasting away, and I've had other friends at my age who, you start to lose part of your tribe more frequently. And every night I think, if I have a little pain in my chest or something, I go like, This could be a heart attack. Ram Dass had a stroke. All of a sudden,
Right.
he's on the floor looking up at the ceiling. I think very viscerally that this could happen to me any moment, with or without the with the pandemic. I was
Mhm.
onto that before the pandemic. Of course, that accelerated. So I think I have a certain fear of now when I look at it, I think I might be more afraid of the kind of um, invalid stature, getting really sick. And, a friend of mine is in the hospital, his stomach's no good. So I think I don't want that kind of, I have a fear of becoming kind of incontinent uh, non-productive and in pain all the time.
Yeah.
And the death itself has a slightly different twist. It's like, I don't
Right.
even know what that is on a certain level. Even though I've studied it for 50 years, personally, can I tell you I know exactly what happens at the moment of death? No.
Mm.
So that would be one thing. Another thing is finishing up things,
Mhm.
like I'm working on certain projects now that with the sense that I'm making an album of music now called Pandemonium, and it's
Ah.
original music. It's sort of my kind of instrumental music that I compose. And I'm thinking, well, this could be my last record. Quite consciously, what do I want it to be like? But that's not fear. There's a sense of completion that I
Yeah,
that
that's
I'm
the word I was hearing, completion.
so I'm afraid of not completing it.
Right. Right.
I
No,
want to feel complete.
thank you for sharing that, because I think there's a lot of people that feel that way at any age. They feel a bump in their chest, or as you get older, it gets more prominent.
Yeah.
But I think that at any time, what you're teaching us is that it's there, and how do you soften into it? How do you have compassion towards it? And speaking of completion, I'd also love for you to share a little bit before we go about your newest movement, I would call it, because I feel like when you talk about it's a movement
Wow.
of what you're creating called Dharma Moon.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So before Dharma Moon started, I had written this book, Creativity, Spirituality, and Making a Buck, and thinking, you know what? Everybody's got their strong suit. That's my strong suit, is integrating those elements.
Mm.
You got your great Buddhist teachers out there. You got your incredible creatives out there. You got your sharp as a tack business people out there. Who's doing all of that and putting it together in an interesting way? So I thought that's really what I want to do. I don't want to just be a classical Buddhist teacher only. I don't want to just be, get my last licks in as a musician. And money, it's like I just want to have enough to live the way I live, which is kind of, I call it, upscale reasonable. I'm what people call restaurant rich. I want to be able to go to a restaurant, but I don't have any aspiration, to have like millions of
Right.
dollars. When
Right.
people go, scaling up in business, and I go, well, that's good for you. And here's the part I like about the business: it sharpens people up. It makes them more realistic. A
True.
lot of spiritual people are not good at it because they're not realistic enough, and so that's not complete enough for me.
Right.
So Dharma Moon emerged with the pandemic. Creativity, spirituality, and making a buck. What happened was we started taking our trainings online. We went virtual a year ago. Um, I taught one-to-one virtually, but every other program I ever taught was live in a room with people. And all of a sudden it's like, that's gone. So now we're going to see, do we want to go virtual or not? And we did, and the programs all grew.
Mm.
What was interesting, and they became global. So we're all of a sudden having 100 people in a teacher training program, and some of them are in Australia and Japan and Europe and Canada and South America. And I'm thinking, this is so cool. This is so cool. And we had a community of people coming together who wanted to share more than just Dharma. They're like creatives, they're like draws like. So people are starting to work on little projects together and going like, oh, I got a demo or over here. I just thought, why don't we create an umbrella for that community to germinate and grow? I had a record label already called Dharma Moon. I thought it was a perfect name for this community. So we started building it. 9 months later, I have 20 people working for me, from being basically kind of at the end of of arc, and it's kind of mind-boggling to me that I'm starting a new venture at this point that is probably has the potential to be by far the biggest adventure that we've gone on so far. So Dharma Moon is a global community and mindfulness-based education platform. You can just go to dharmamoon.com. That's the easiest way to find out what's going on with it. But it's growing very rapidly and basically fulfilling all these aspects of what people like you and I are interested in, drawing like-minded people together through the virtual portal.
And I would actually encourage everyone to go check it out, because every time I'm on it, I learn something. Every time I'm on it, even just looking at the first image makes me feel calmer. Looking at the image of the sky. So I would encourage everyone to look at it and to join it. You could take a class. You could start a community. You could have a connection. I kept thinking it was kind of like, I hope this is okay to say, but like the Facebook of connection, a deeper connection, a real connection. That's the difference thing I think that's so important about us to know about where David is taking us all now. We started off in the beginning of like a child growing up in New York City and, finding his way to Buddhism, to business and to creativity. And he's bringing all of them together. You're bringing them all together in such a beautiful way of service, deep, deep service. So as we come full close in this moment, I'd love to hear, and being that my podcast is called Cracking Open and we're cracking open to every experience, what's the last thing you want to share with us around your deepest teachings around the cracking open and going beneath the shell and into the heart?
Well, here's what we say: first thought, best thought, a lot in my tradition. Just go for that first thought. So I operate on that premise a lot. So when you said cracking open, we could take that very personally and think, oh God, I'm, like something that was under a lot of pressure is now released, psst, makes that kind of a sound, But when you said, I thought of my chest cracking open and birds flying out of it and flying to every corner of the world. Because that, when we crack open, is also when we can really express ourselves and connect. That's a part of it that, somehow seems very important to me right at this point. So I don't want to hold anything back at this point. Where am I going to put it? Where am I going to hold it? But the idea of sharing with people is like, really a big deal for me right now. And particularly younger people, because that's how human thing goes. It goes in cycles. And I would like to pass through, I had some brilliant teachers in my life, really did. They made a big difference in my life. So I'd like to pass along some of that to the next gang coming along. And also I make a rule of it. We have to have fun, or we're not doing it.
Amen. Amen.
I'll crack open, but I want to have some fun doing it.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, David, what a gift it has been to be with you. Thank you for all your wisdom and your heart. Thank you for all your generosity and your spirit and your service. We are all better for it. So thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you here.
Yeah. Thank you. And good luck with the podcast.
Thank you. Hey, if you're interested in a free gift, I want to tell you about my body emotion map. I created this map that shows the entire body and what emotions we hold in what organs. Not only what emotions we hold in the organs, but how can we release these emotions so that our body does not become toxic, we don't hold bad energy, and we can feel lighter, freer, and more alive. So if you're interested in this free gift, please head over to mollycarrollprograms.com/map. mollycarrollprograms.com/map, MAP, to get your free body emotion map that will help you feel so much more alive and better. Please, you won't regret it. Head on over there.